right, welcome to the latest episode of Unemprising Minds. You have Alex and Dave here with you this week. Hope you're all doing wonderfully. Alex and I are going to talk about sort of the hidden dangers of productivity hacks and everything else that people seem to be obsessed about. Are we too focused on the upside? Probably. So now that we have the TLDR
episode. Sorry, people.
Yeah, no, I think this is a good one to talk about because there's been a lot of stuff that's come out this week. As I've been perusing LinkedIn and the various publications I follow, and the topic that you pitched, before we started recording, is definitely something I'm living right now. So, why don't you cue us up for the conversation?
Sure. So we were talking a little bit in the last couple episodes. We talked a bit about automation, and other episodes we talked about AI's usage and the efficiency gains, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always a hidden element behind it. And I think we've been fairly unbiased and relatively fair in our kind of persistent kind of prompting of this takes work. Mm-hmm. It's not a freebie. So automation, even we get to some like more basic stuff of like just, live dashboards, reporting, automation, just kind of like some little things like that. There's a lot of effort behind it. And the more that you start to do it, you start building up this stack. And it's a MarTech stack in a way where you are training people, you're sharing it, you're maintaining it. So now you have a stack of administrative, duties that you've created for yourself by creating that report that everybody loves, by creating that GPT that's been shared around. Someone has a question, goes to you. Someone has, wants access to it, it's back to you again.
Right.
It breaks, back to you again. So you're building up this like artificial stack, and I don't think it's fully recognized, at least. One element of this that I'll mention is the understanding of how much maintenance cost all of these things creates. Like each one that you've done, great, but now there's a maintenance cost on top of that. So that's a monthly cost of time. And you kind of have to factor that in. It may have saved you a bunch of time from creating it manually, but now you're maintaining a new dashboard, a new report, a new thing.
Right.
Dave, you've seen some of the pain of the build as well.
Yeah.
You've done some automation work. You want to reference or mention that?
Yeah, so I think I brought this up in one of the last episodes where I was playing around with Make, and I was looking at the podcast sort of production side of things, because as we've grown and as we've gotten more listeners and subscribers, we added the something simple, like we added the email newsletter. And so that call to action needed to go into the description of every episode. Well, when we do this, we're doing an audio version and the video version for YouTube. And so that meant going back into the podcast player or platform and updating the things there, and then going into every single YouTube description and uploading it there. Now, there are ways, if you're using, make.com, to do this. I just saw somebody's workflow on how to do this exact thing, but like most things in life, I saw that after I had done this.
Of course.
So it was a lot to go through 57 episodes, I think, at the time we were at, and to go in and go find this, go find that, go find this, but then also just updating the templates that I use for the calls to action, right? Because each episode has the description for the episode, and then the calls to action and our episode links and tagging of, my other channels on YouTube and tagging you guys when necessary. So like there's a lot of optional extra stuff that goes into each thing. So then as I'm looking at even just the template stuff, I'm not trying to do, any sort of fancy thing, because this is still a new way of thinking for me. This is my way of like jumping into like the coder dev side of stuff without being one. So I just pulled up a template on make.com, and there was one for getting descriptions and whatever else. But then I realized, oh, I have to add a new column to the Google Sheet that I'm using. So now I have to go through all of the descriptions and upload those. And I had been piecing out elements of the description, like the chapters and the description and the hashtags and everything else. Whereas if I wanted to fully automate it, all of those things need to be brought in to a single cell for description. So is it worth it for me to then go through and recapture every single description as is? No. And I know some of you on the more techie side are thinking, well, you just create a make.com thing to scrape any of the content off of the YouTube to then get a new sheet. Yeah, I tried that. It was only pulling a certain character limit because I wasn't about to pay X number of dollars a month for full stuff. Also, the rate limiting on these platforms is interesting to me because it's, your free version gets you like kilobytes, which is like, okay, so I'm going to have to, or megabytes, I should say. I'm only going to be able to do any sort of like text-based content. I'm not going to be able to, download a video, upload a video to multiple places, sure. Right? Because each one of the videos on these things are 10, 20, 30 gigabytes. So now I'm in like the upper tier for each of those things for the automations, plus the automations of, the text-based content and the admin, sure. And the whatever else. And so I said, okay, because it's text, let's look at social media. And so I started looking at it and I'm like, okay, but I could also just pay $20 a month for a social media platform that just automatically does this for me. And all I have to do is drag and drop. So is it worth it for me to build the functionality of a social media tool that already exists for basically the same amount of money? No, it doesn't. I'm just going to get the social media platform. I'm going to, put it in and be done with it. Now, that being said, I'm fully happy to say I'm new to this. I am learning. I think there are some things there, but honestly, I don't really find a lot of joy in a lot of this automation stuff. So this is where, some of the AI promises kind of fall flat because you still need to be able to set up the thing that you want to do. So it still means you need to have that kind of developer friend that you can go to set things up for you so that it just works. Right? Mm-hmm. Thoughts, comments, feedback. I know you're similar to me where we want to at least test some things and try some things out. What have you worked on, or what are you thinking?
Yeah. I was thinking there's an old book. It's behind me, so I was going to look at it. Algorithms of the Intelligent Web. This book has got to be 15 years old now, at least. It was an eye-opening book for me because I started to realize all the API connection sort of websites that are out there where you're scraping all the rental properties off of Craigslist and you're putting it into a nicer looking website and you're having people sign up for this apartment finder website. And you're charging these apartments, money for them to show the phone number of contact or have ads or be listed first in your rankings, where really all you're doing is you're scraping Craigslist and throwing it on a nicer Google map and a nicer looking, setup. Right. Add some filters based upon, the different things that already Craigslist has, right? That kind of opened my mind and it helped me understand some of the options, the realistic options that are out there. Not that the output wouldn't take a ton of work. I'm sure it does. It's that that it's an option in the first place. And I think that's a really key piece with AI is trying to understand what are the potential outcomes that you can get.
Right.
And then keeping those in mind, what's the best way to go after it? And what you found through your kind of long discovery process is that there are tools already out there that, skip a bunch of steps. But the tools that you were familiar with took a bunch of steps, and then eventually you kind of came to that education point of realizing, hey, isn't there something else? And then now you know very specifically the problem you're trying to solve, and now you can very easily find that other thing that's already been pre-made, either
Right.
purchase that or build that or go after that. Which aligns a lot with a lot of the different podcasts I've been listening to of these different AI companies. Claude, I mean, a couple of different people from OpenAI, including Sam Altman, a few others. They have kids, and one of the most common questions the hosts always ask them is, would you still teach your kids programming and coding?
Mm-hmm.
And the common answer to all of them is no. And these folks are all developers by
Right.
trade or kind of background at least. Maybe their new role is product or something like that, but they had a background at least of development. And the response to this was no, but I want them to understand computer science.
Mm.
And they all had the same response. It's so funny how just they all said it in slightly different ways, but it's basically is everybody wants to make sure that their kids still understand how data can flow, how websites get built in theory, in essence, basically how
Right.
they actually are built. Not that you actually need to know CSS. You don't. Especially with GPT-5, a lot of different coding platforms that are out just now. They're fantastic and they can really build a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't really need to know all those details, but you still have to be able to troubleshoot them to some degree. You have to have a conceptual understanding of what they do. You have to have some kind of understanding of how to implement them. So
Right.
let's say you get the CSS. That's fantastic. What do you do with that? You have a file.
Right.
Great. Well, you need a domain name. You have to have a host. You have to have, like start building out the website. You need all these different files. You need to have all these different things set up. How do you do that? Go through the process of buying a domain, build a website, give it a shot. Those things,
Right.
you can skill up in every single direction that's out there, but you still have to understand those basic things and kind of keep that element moving. So I think with any of the automation or MarTech kind of an AI builds, the, I mean, everyone feels overwhelmed by AI. I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty fair blanket statement. It's moving so fast. There is so much that could be possible. Will I lose my job? Will I lose elements of my job? Are there elements of my job that can totally change? Or can this be super beneficial to me? Can I do brand new
Right.
things I've never done before? All of that is related to understanding conceptually what the potential outputs could be, and then having enough of that understanding so that that learning curve, which shoots up really really fast at the beginning, you're like, oh man, everything's really easy, and then you try it. You have that first dip, and I think that's the most important piece to get to with any of this stuff, is getting to that first dip. You have to get to that low point, because
Mm-hmm.
then you actually have some understanding of, oh, I can do all these things, but it's going to take a whole bunch of work to implement it. It's going to take a whole bunch of troubleshooting. It's going to take a whole bunch of whatever to try to like get this going. Or I learned one piece and it turns out there's 20. I thought it was just one.
Right.
Once you get to that dip, I think that's a key either stopping point or key point to at least try to always attain with any of these things is the low point. It's not the high point, not the, oh my gosh, I can do cool things, splash page of any, SaaS product. They always have fantastic homepages and all the options you can do with these things. It's amazing, right?
Right.
That's not helpful. The key piece after that is what's it going to take? And I think that low point's really important. So like what you went through is a very, very important journey of understanding like, yeah, Make can do cool stuff, but
Right.
try to implement one. And now you start to understand, oh, it takes a bunch of effort and there's cost. And actually the usage, the way I'm using it is not going to really work. And maybe there's a different company or a different product or something like that. Like
Right.
that's such an important discovery point with every project, every new tech.
Yeah. I mean, because it's, you know, is AI going to take my job? Well, maybe elements of it, right? I think
Yeah.
everybody's trying to really kind of find that. And there was a Gartner study that came out recently that, basically found that employment in the 22 to 25-year-old sort of college graduate is down 13% since 2022.
Yeah. Right.
Right. So that's kind of brutal because I remember um, being
Same.
a graduate into the Great Recession with arts degrees and just being like, I know I can outperform a ton. I need to, I just need somebody to give me a chance.
Yeah.
Right. Um,
Yeah.
and luckily that ended up happening eventually, but it was like a 5-year journey. Right. I mean, just
Yeah.
with the market and everything else. So, the higher level, maybe mid-career people who actually know how a lot of processes work already. I mean, they're staying then in the jobs that are there and are becoming AI assisted. Um, but yeah, I mean, you're still going to need the Martech stack. You're still going to need, whatever else. And then every time I look at the LinkedIn, um, the posts from people around as the so-called experts, right? And
Yeah.
I'm guilty of it too. I mean, we're running a podcast and promoting it, and whatever else.
Mhm.
But I feel like a lot of these people who are like, oh, I'm using this to create like my own agency of pure AI bots. I was like, well, that's cool if you want to outsource trust and relationships and everything
Yeah.
else, that's there. But then also that is something that is uniquely solopreneur,
Hmm.
because the amount of data that you're giving up and the amount of IP that you're giving up by automating everything is massive. So, for those of us in larger organizations or even mid-sized organizations, who have, maybe one or two lawyers, employed, you're going to have conversations because, man, if you need the intellectual property of it, or you need the copyright of any of the content you create, you need to have done the content yourself. And you need to have in your agency agreements or vendor agreements that you will not use AI for these particular things because we need to hold copyright, you know? Um, so I think it's cool how far certain people are taking it. For me, it's kind of like avant-garde jazz, where it's like, okay, that's a necessary part of the journey. You need people on the edges of stuff, but let's not forget that the vast majority of people just want to listen to a little bit of feel-good music when they're dropping their kids off at school and starting their day. That's 90% of how people are leveraging stuff, right? Um, yeah, yeah. I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah. There's the other piece there is building a moat. And if AI is your solution to everything,
Mhm.
well, guess what? Everyone has access to it. That's not really much of a barrier for anybody else to enter that same market. Your moat is non-existent or very, very small. I mean, the moment
Mhm.
someone starts to try just as hard as you did, they get it too. So that's not a strong position to be in, and it's not a long-term position either. I was thinking about that with a lot of the side hustle things that people do is there's two elements to it as well, of not just the amount of time and effort you're putting into it right now to build it up and create it, and
Right.
time and energy and thought. I mean, you're thinking about it probably in your evenings, you're thinking about it during the day. There's effort, a lot of effort gets put towards any substantial project.
Right.
There's also a limitation to it as well. Like, let's say you build up your Etsy store, fantastic, and Etsy goes down and gets bought by somebody else. Well, there goes that.
Right.
Like there's a timeline to all these projects too, of like, I'm going to create an album. Cool. Once you create the album, you've done it. Now you're going to sell it. But are you going to sell it for the next 20 years? No. There's a period of time in which you're going to push it and pitch it, and then the market's going to change and things will change, and you're going to probably have to go do it again. So
Mhm.
there's continual elements to a lot of these projects too that I think get quickly forgotten. And if you're creating an AI only, which I've seen too many of those, where it's, I'm all over Fiverr, and except it's actually just a whole bunch of Zapier kind of prompts and OpenAI, and it's responding immediately to people and giving them SEO advice or something like that. And I'm collecting my $5 every time someone signs up for my service. Okay, you're not going to build a brand off of that, though.
Right. It's almost like do you remember the really old Carnival arcade thing where it was like um the puppet that would tell you your future, and you put in
Sure.
$2 and it would say some just sort of generic thing after starting up. I mean, that's
Right.
kind of what I feel like that is just sort of, yeah, give me the $2, I'll collect it, and you walk away feeling okay for 30 seconds and you'll forget it.
Yeah. Yep. There it goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not really building something long term. You're not also creating enough of like a retainer based model or anything else that's actually going to provide consistent income. And the moment that, 50 other people have the same thought, you're now going to have 50 competitors pushing you down in the results on Fiverr.
Mm-hmm.
There's just not a whole lot of length to it.
I saw something driving around, speaking of side hustles, and it got me thinking about some of the conversations you and I have had off mic. Well, and some on too, where it was this guy, it was a beat up pickup truck, and it just said Mike's Weekend Construction.
Yeah.
Talk about side hustle. And like, that is really well positioned. I'm only working Saturday, Sunday. I'm only being the contractor for projects that can be done Saturday and Sunday.
Right, exactly. How long does it take? 4 weekends. You mean 8 days? No. 4 weekends.
4 weekends. Let's make sure this is, scoped correctly here. Yeah, but I was like, man alive, you talk about niching down. Like, nope. I'm saying no to 5 out of the 7 days.
Exactly. Smart though also, because there's actually kind of a bottom tier, bottom dollar market. There's a significant gap there where basically any company who has a number of employees, trucks, equipment, rentals, everything else can't quote $100 job. It's just not worth their time to even send somebody out there because they're going to lose it by the time they've, done all the overhead of just processing the job.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're going to lose it. So there's a pretty big gap there actually. So I could totally see someone like that being like, hey, I've got, just a small job, something like very, very small. And then that being a perfect fit where actually you find that niche, you find that hole in their market, and then there's something there. That's something available there.
Right. It's like I've had these framed pictures and album cover things that I've been meaning to hang up since we moved into this house like 6 years ago. They're still not up. At this point, I'm willing to pay somebody to just come in and make sure they're level
and get off my list.
Just get it done. Yeah, because I'm clearly not doing it. So yeah, it's just, and I just hate that stuff. That's just not what I'm good at. That's not what I like doing. So speaking of things that are annoying, your other topic that you pitched for today's conversation is the 4-day work week versus 3-day work week. What is the point? And does it fail to meet productivity? I think is what you said, right?
Yeah. At what point? Yeah. Talked over you, but at what point does benefits fail to meet productivity? Yeah. Mm-hmm. There was a study done recently, I think 100-something organizations, over 1,000 individuals. They did a 6-month test of the 4-day work week, trying to understand both employee happiness based on survey results, as well as productivity. And it was 90% of the organizations after 6 months decided to keep it. Basically, they saw value in both directions of people were pretty happy with it, plus productivity was still there. And I mean, long story short, on a 40-hour work week and a 5-day-a-week work agreement, basically it's based on manufacturing shifts. and a good, easy way to basically split up the 24 hours of a day and how many shifts do you have? Well, you basically split it and you have a
2
40-hour week
shifts. Yeah.
or one shift, right? Which is why we do office work this way, which is actually kind of ridiculous. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Right.
Um, I I think it works to a point. It depends on the complexity and the organization of an organization. So
Right.
if you're highly organized, punching tickets basically, and there's not a big deadline on them, it could be done this week or it could be done next week,
Hmm.
they'll probably work really, really well.
Right.
If you're constantly trying to meet with people who are all over the place, you're really going to struggle to book a meeting with a whole bunch of people if they're only working that many hours, right? So if
Yeah.
you have a job that's more consultative, discussion-based, politics, internal office politics kind of junk, that's going to be a tough one. So I think there's got to be, there's a point there of maybe it's meeting reduction, maybe it's better priorities and better goals at work, better management. And then with that, you start to slim down the number of hours that people, if there's any expectation, which I think is disappointing. I mean, as a manager myself of a few different teams now at this point, I'm always disappointed by the idea of hours. I
Hmm.
care about outputs. I don't care about the hours. If
Right.
the hours are ridiculous, they're past 40, that's worth a conversation of trying to figure out, how do you prioritize work better? How do you scope it down better? How do you basically set expectations better? Because it shouldn't be outside of 40. I mean, think about it from a salary standpoint. Honestly, cut it to an hours. That's how much you're making.
Right.
And the moment you start working more hours than that, you're diluting your pay. You're no longer getting that hourly amount. You're now getting less, right? So
Hmm.
don't do that. Kind of keep it tight.
Right.
And if you had good management and good practices, you probably aren't going to be exceeding 40 ever, really. You're going to do it realistically and you're going to scope it appropriately.
Well, like a lot of our conversations, even on text, I have to shout out the fact that if is
If,
doing a lot of heavy
oh
lifting
yeah.
there.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I can't say that's been most organizations I've been at where at least I've been able to typically have freedom, especially as a manager of like a specialty
Right.
where I can kind of, sign up for work as I feel appropriate versus, being told to do, part of a larger org where there's kind of preset expectations.
Yep.
I get to set the expectations. So that's very helpful. But in the organizations where I haven't had that choice, yeah, yeah, right. Like it just doesn't happen. Like,
Right. Yeah, I
yeah,
think for me, the the big things that I try to do. So I kind of chunk out the year based on sort of, quarter one is setting expectations. This is what I think I'm going to be able to do for this year. Here are my targets. Here's how they break out sort of quarter by quarter, month over month, depending on how specific people want to get. Personally, I don't like getting overly specific, but definitely having here's the main thing and a couple of milestones to shoot for to make it more manageable. Then sort of Q2, Q3 is working hard to make sure that you're hitting those milestones and communicating out to people to, hey, we're on track. I've run into this hiccup, but I think we'll still be able to, do it maybe like a week later. Right. Just having those recurring conversations because,
sure.
already we haven't even hit like true fall yet. I'm getting feedback from people like, hey, you have the most aggressive goals. Are you sure you're going to be able to hit those? And I'm like, well, yeah, if you just look at the dashboard, I look really bad. But when you look at it, I said I would hit 10% this year. Other people said they were hit 2% this year. So I'm 5Xing. So just let me get to work. Like,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, it's funny the reliance on the dashboards and the conversations with leadership because there is a little bit of context there. Like if I'm trying to outperform by quite a bit, there's going to be a lot more conversations I need to talk about. right? To make sure that everybody's okay when they look at the dashboard and they see it's red or green or whatever color combination you choose to institute for,
Mm-hmm.
your organization. But to your point, those milestones are the outcomes. So if I'm on track and I'm getting enough work done each week, each, month, who cares if that takes me 50 hours, 30 hours, 40 hours? That's on me to maintain.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that I did this year in particular to make sure that I could get those aggressive goals is anytime anybody would throw on a meeting, I would say, okay, you realize I'm trying to do XYZ. How does this meeting help me get there? And if it's something else, that needs to either go into somebody else or we can put it in a backlog and I'll get to you when I'm done working on the priorities. Luckily for me, that has worked. I have had enough supportive people around me that appreciate the communication. They appreciate the aggressive goals. So it's been working. But I know a lot of people who would be very uncomfortable with, being the tall poppy and having to communicate, too much. Right. Yeah. Yeah. How does that ring with what you were thinking? Because I know I kind of go off sideways sometimes.
Oh, it does. I mean, it does get down to good management and
Right.
consistent role definition, consistent outputs and stuff like that. Past orgs, I've always struggled with that because we would set goals in the first month, and then by like month 2, things had changed. And by month 3, it's unrecognizable from what month was.
Right.
And then about 6 months into it, we got reorged yet again. And now our job duties and responsibilities have completely shifted yet again, which that is not an element of myself or even my, direct surrounding team. It's always a larger org kind of thing that's going on.
Right.
But that, again, is based upon the organization's leadership and how they're doing that. You do it well, you have good information flow. Everybody's on the same page and has a realistic understanding, a pragmatic view of the business and the industry and the market. And from top down, you have a very general goal. That's the company strategy. You have a more specific goal, which is maybe your department division. You have a much more refined goal that gets down to your day-to-day tasks, which that's your immediate team and manager. And that's how that's supposed to work, right? Company is supposed to have a general direction. And then below that, it's supposed to be kind of interpreted for what's realistic and what you're going to actually influence. Not just like, hey, by the way, we should be manufacturing more, and be like, well, it's not my job.
Right.
But what can I do to help that situation? Well, maybe it's demand gen, maybe it's service and support side of it. Like there's probably an element that still gets translated down. And that's good company organization.
Right.
I was going to bring it up today, and I think I may have brought it up a few times in the past. The garbage can model. It's a fun Wikipedia read. The garbage can model was basically in understanding that most organizations are pretty dysfunctional. And the idea of, which this is a theory back from, I think, the early 70s. And it was kind of an ongoing issue of what was going on when they were at a college and they were trying to find a new dean and they were doing these interviews, but not everybody could make every interview from the interview panel. So then they had a random scoring system, but then that didn't work. And then the timing didn't work out. So eventually it was like the person who was head of the search just became the dean because they just gave up. It was like the individuals involved eventually wrote a paper on this and created what they call the garbage can model. And there's various versions of this as well. And most organizations basically hit this because it's a very complex, messy. Some people are narcissistic. Some people are egotistical. Some people are, lackadaisical. It doesn't matter how many kind of personalities you have in a room, but you're probably going to have a mix of all of them at some point over the course of the year as people's personalities, change by the minute from what's going on in the environment. You always have this messy model, basically. So good leadership that has good information that it's working off of, which means
Right.
honest communication going both directions, complete information. There's a lot of, as you said, ifs that are kind of going on. Those create strong organizations. And I think with those strong organizations, it's a lot easier to then identify goals, progress towards them, stick with them, that kind of thing. Like that's entirely possible. The more
Right.
messy an organization is, the more who knows what's going on. And the hot project that you worked on a month ago might be forgotten, which is so disappointing. Like you spend so much time on something and it's like, nope, not
Mm-hmm.
anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
that's
don't
why
know.
like
That makes it tough.
yeah, no, that's a I like that model idea. Although, when you said 70s, my mind immediately thought of lava lamps
Yeah,
because
maybe
my
I'll
experience in big corporations, uh, especially conglomerates, is that like a lava lamp, you will have multiple sort of blobs that come
Yep.
together, and those tend to be personalities of a similar kind.
Yes.
And that'll be one division, that'll be the biggest one that has the most
Yep.
aggressive behavior. Then you got these
Right.
little ones that kind of circle around and capture whatever they can, and then you get the
Right.
medium ones that are nice to look at, but they don't really get in the way of too much.
Right.
And everybody's just kind of circling in whatever, right?
Hmm.
So coming up with this metaphor live, so failing in a little way, but I don't know, that's the way my brain works. I thought of that to
Yeah, you do
describe
have
at
kind
least
of
my
one.
experience with that, right? Like,
Yeah. You get ones that rise to the top, you get ones that cool down and start to fall. You kind of do that cycle over and over again. And
mm-hmm,
it's random. It's randomized on the way up. So continuing your metaphor there.
right. Although
It's
I've been thinking about this a lot. There was a leader in one of the previous businesses I was in who constantly talked about how no matter what you do, you cannot sort of outperform the market, right? Or the influence of the market, right?
okay.
So if the market's growing 3%, you can grow 4 or 5%, and
Hmm.
that's wonderful. But ultimately, the facade that we all work towards, and especially you see this on LinkedIn, is that we have more control over it than we, actually do, right?
Yes. My gosh,
So
yes. Yes. Yep. Had this
the
conversation
macro
with some
environment
folks. Yep.
will slam you like a cartoon hammer in the head. Like,
Yes.
yeah. And you're just going to have to make do with what you got.
Right.
Especially coming into the back half of 2025. I think that is going to be an interesting metaphor to keep in the back of our heads. All right. How to end on a happy note, Alex, because that went south real quick.
Well, it's a lot of education and a
A
lot of
lot of it,
learning,
yeah.
a lot of information from the beginning of this episode to the end. We've talked about that of learning and educating yourself as much as possible on what's going on around you, which
Mm-hmm.
includes AI and tech and all the rest of that kind of stuff, but understanding also from a pragmatic view, there's limits to it all.
Right.
Same thing with the market and your role and your organization. There's a lot of kind of hoorah, happiness and positivity, but at the same time, you have to be pragmatic and learn and push for learning. And I think that's a big misconception of any organization, and they constantly fall into this. And I think that's just humanity in general because we work off of it, is we
Right.
love anecdotes, and it's a lot harder to get real life experience. And the more that you can get real life experience versus someone's random anecdote of, things are going great. How great is great? Oh, well, things were going great a month ago. This month's not so great. And actually, compared to our industry, we're doing terrible. Like that's a whole lot of different information than what you just heard from the first anecdote, right? So you have to get into it and you have to try it and push on it and then just be an open learner who's not afraid to ask the stupid question, not afraid to try.
Right. No, that was a really good summary. Like, subscribe, share, and come by for the next thing. We do have the Pathways newsletter, which has been awesome and a lot of fun to see the response to that. And you will do deeper dives into, maybe off of this episode, we'll do a deeper dive into the trash can model. I don't know. Well, that sounds intriguing. So yeah, thanks for hanging out. I hope your next 2 weeks are enjoyable and you take some time to educate and try some things out and, have some time for yourself. Don't get caught in the to-do list trap. That is a mantra that I think we should all adapt. So have a wonderful weekend, and Alex, we'll see you on the next episode. Take care.
See you.